We're back with our Masters of the Air Talks live show, here to discuss episode 4. With me is John W. Peace II, the author of A Boy from Cracker's Neck, and Daniel Davis, who is lucky enough to be my oldest son. So, John, would you like to kick us off with your thoughts about the episode we just watched?
Well, the first observation, and I love the episode was, this episode showed no fighting in the air. I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier. This is one episode that didn't have the CGI, didn't have the air battles in it. And probably what I appreciated the most, and I was trying to reflect, and I even wrote down a few notes on the one thing I love about this miniseries, and it starts with this episode specifically, is it's showing 3 or 4 different story arcs. We've been following the Bomber Boys and their courageous battle and their horrific battles in the air and stuff. But, this episode, you start seeing the resistance fighters. I think it's the narrator, and y'all can correct me on my quote here. The narrator talks about courage comes in many different forms. And I thought that was so poetic, because this episode, not only do you see the battle going on behind enemy lines in France with the resistance fighters, you have Bucky going to London, and you're seeing the results of civilian. I mean, here's the civilian population in England that's just trying to survive, trying to work the factory jobs, trying to support the war effort and stuff. And you see, your first glimpse of what they've gone through. And then also, I rewatched it a second time just to really watch this one scene, is the Red Cross girl, Helen. And, the one, and y'all might remember his name was Lieutenant Nash.
Yes.
And this is what the second or third captain that told her, well, you might be the last pretty face I see. And she says, don't say, and then he didn't come back either.
Yeah.
So, so you have a story arc there, and you just felt for her. And, she's trying to do her duty, trying to be supportive of these men and, befriending them. And, just, it kind of breaks your heart. And you see, a little bit on different levels of how it affects different people. So I'll kind of leave it at that. And Danny, what do you think of it?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I enjoyed. I will counter. There was a little bit of CGI in this episode. We got to have the fun buzz of the tower when the first B-17 that made their 25 missions comes home. And I think in addition, the fact that I love that we're out of the air so much is we get to see all of the mini storylines just within the bomber groups. The bomber group or a bomber pilot or crewman's life was not all in the air.
Yes.
We got to see them celebrate their. I think might have some technical difficulties down in.
We'll just keep going.
We'll just keep running it. We get to see them celebrating coming back after 25 missions. We get to see the debate after of the party of what are we doing here, and the guy that was kind of glum about his life versus the other two that were eager to get into the air. And we got to see with Helen, as much as it is the experience of the Red Cross to watch these boys leave, and they're boys, they're doing the jobs of men, but they're the age of boys in many cases, leave and not come back. But at the same time, you see the friend of Lieutenant Nash having to go up and tell her and have to experience that bringing of the news. And so there's so many different dynamics that this episode brought.
Yes.
That we haven't gotten previous episodes. And so I was really, really enjoyed watching this one for that time and for that, window into so many different parts of this time in this life.
Well, one thing you brought up, the party, and one thing that kind of struck me, and if you're fortunate enough to have read the book, that when the colonel comes up to him talking about how he just had met with the doctor, and how he's kind of downplaying the what he called flak happy.
Yeah,
and he said, "Y'all ain't getting flak happy on me and stuff." And we all know mental illness is real, and it's so sad to think about the military really thought that something, being flak sick or what we know as PTSD now was just, well, you just weren't tough. You got to tough it out. And the current talking about, oh, war's been going on forever, son. You just got to tough it out and everything. And then, you start seeing Bucky, who is showing some signs of that. And Bucky kind of kind of showing resistance to the Colonel. Exactly. When I was watching it, I mean, did you kind of know, was he playing with them? What do you think?
Here, I'm also gonna my mother is calling me real quick, so I'm gonna
go right ahead.
Hello. Okay, we're still running the show. Everything's running still. So
yeah, and for the viewers out there, our third party is in Houston, Texas, and having thunderstorm
you
problems.
Might just be able to join when you get internet. You might be able to just join the web page again, and it might just load you back in. So try and join your session again, and you should be able to load back in. So yeah, I don't either, but we'll figure it out when we get there. But yeah, we're still going, but they know I'm on with you. So once you get internet, okay.
The joys of TV.
Yep.
And the viewers,
weather don't give no care what you're doing.
Yeah, I know. And internet problems, and if you have a thunderstorm and stuff. In fact, I'm in Virginia. Danny, where are you located?
Utah.
Right?
I'm up in the mountains of Utah.
Utah, Virginia, and Texas, and we're having thunderstorm. And I was actually worried this morning about our internet connection here with thunderstorms. Sometimes we have problems.
Sounds like she's lost hers completely. She's gonna try and join onto the web page and join back with us once her internet's back up. So we'll see how long that takes.
Yeah. You were talking about, we were talking about being flak happy, PTSD, and you start seeing Bucky, and you could see Buck really like going, dude, you need a weekend pass.
Yeah,
and he could see it in his buddy, and I'll let you take it from there.
I think you asked my opinion on, do you know what's happening as it's going on? And for the viewers, a fun dynamic here is that John has read or is reading Masters of the Air.
I finished it a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it had fully finished or not, but he has read. I have not. This is one of few books. I've done a fair amount of military reading, but this is not one I've done yet. And so it's almost fun because I get to be more of that like layman's viewer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's happening. I have no idea what happens next. Whereas my mom and John have read the books and know a little bit more of the story. Here we go.
Hey.
Speak of the lady, and she appears.
I'm glad you could keep going. I had no idea that was possible.
Melanie, we're discussing the scene at the party when the Colonel comes up saying he had just met with the flight surgeon and saying, boys, y'all ain't getting flak happy on me, are you? And how he was kind of making fun of what we know as PTSD nowadays. They called it flak sickness back in the day. My granddad just called it shell shock and everything.
Yeah, that's the most common term.
And that dynamic, that dialogue, and when I was watching it live with Bucky and the Colonel, and Bucky was kind of back talking them, going, "No, you're the one being flak happy if you think that's going to happen." And Buck's over here, you going, "Whoa, buddy, you need a weekend pass," because he sees some of that stress on his friend Bucky.
So I'm now giving the reaction because we had just discussed how you two have read the book. I have not. My reaction is that we've already seen him in previous episodes on the wing talking with one of the other bomber pilots.
Was it Kurt?
I think Kurt. It was the guy. It was. I know it was the same guy that knocked the Brit out when they went to the bar.
that got killed in the last episode.
Yeah,
it was kind of shocking.
Threw a mean right hook, apparently.
Did America proud in the boxing match.
Yes, sir. So we've already seen him struggle even there, just with the coming across in the first mission. So it was like, you don't know how much is joking and how much is he's in his drink.
Mm-hmm.
and how much is PTSD showing? Because it's all three are juggling possibilities that we've seen. Because we know he's really drunk in that scene. We know he's got some level of PTSD going from the scenes on the plane, and he could just be messing around with him. So it really was a cool, emotionally charged moment, because you don't know, like, it's a mix of all of them, not just one.
Uh-huh. One thing we talked about the book versus the miniseries a little bit. The book, the first third of the book went into quite a bit of detail about the medical problems these men were facing. And you saw it in episode 1, 2, and 3 with severe, below zero, flying in below zero weather, the frostbite, not having any first aid on the plane and everything. And the book talked about, the flight surgeon was a very important person on base because he could ground you. And, so if you saw any kind of mental distress and all that, you went to see the flight surgeon. He was the head medical doctor. And the book talked a lot more about how, this was the first time. And, the colonel's associate said, well, there's never been a war where you fought at 30,000 feet in the air.
And you have
below
planes.
Zero. Yes.
Yeah.
So the medical profession really there was no history of this, and there was nothing to look back on. So they were going, there was no concern for these men as far as on the medical side. When they came up with the B-17 bomber, and said, "Oh, we're gonna fly at 30,000 feet. We're gonna bomb," but they really didn't think about taking care of the men before or after.
Yeah.
And I've already seen the frostbite issues, and the next issue that this one's going to go into is the PTSD. They never had experienced this type of PTSD from aerial combat. So, and the book goes in a little bit more detail, and you have to cut things out for the miniseries, and that part's probably not the most entertaining for TV when you're just talking about medical history and a lot of the military theory. So,
but I mean, they are doing a good job of weaving in what the men are experiencing, and I'm curious to see as the show goes how they weave in more of that, the medical side, because they totally. I mean, Band of Brothers kind of did the same thing, where some of the early episodes didn't include it at all, and they're two perfect comparisons of, okay, where are they showing things and how do they show them, and we get to see some of the later episodes with them, how they handled some of the mental health and all of that. And so I would not be surprised if it's a topic they don't address more as the show goes. I'm just interested to see how it is that they address it.
You made the comparison with Band of Brothers. The episode, the Battle of Castone, was it Castone?
Bastogne.
With the nurse and the health problems and stuff. And this episode in Masters of Air is the first one that you kind of start seeing some little subplots and some small little personal stories. I know in reading on a lot of comments on what few complaints there's been about the miniseries, I think they were missing some of those personal stories, and I think this episode might have addressed a lot of that.
Yeah,
you saw that with the Red Cross, the Helen. You saw that with Bucky going to London, seeing how the civilians were being hurt. So you get this overarching story, and this is what I say I really loved about this episode. You start seeing some other story arcs now, and then of course the resistance fighters, and what happens. These airmen, I had never before this miniseries, as much as I've read about World War II, I grew up with my granddad who was a B-17 bomber pilot. I never had really thought about POWs or what happened to those airmen once they bailed out. And not to give anything away, that's going to be an important thing in the future of the miniseries. And
I mean, we already saw it even with the end of the episode 3, where he has that decision.
Yes,
they gave him the conditions right then and there of, look, you can try and escape and probably die, or you can go to a POW camp and probably die.
Wow. I mean, and think about that. I mean, talking about a conflict. And I did not know, and before this miniseries, that if you tried to escape, that you were considered a spy and you were not, undercover of the Geneva Convention, you would just be shot. I just assumed if you were trying to escape, you were considered a POW. So, this miniseries is showing a lot of stuff to a lot of people about issues that I didn't even know about. So I got handed to them. I really give them a pat on the back.
They've done their research, and they're really and circling around, seeing all of this, and finally seeing the personal stories of the resistance, the personal stories of the people in London. It makes sense, part of why we got dropped where we got dropped in episode 1.
Yes.
Because, okay, what are the personal stories that are going to be around for more than a month as far as in show time, which is like 5 minutes on screen or 10 minutes on screen? Who's going to be around for more than 10 minutes of screen time? Well, it's going to be the Red Cross. It's going to be the ground crew. It's going to be the colonel, anyone who's not up in the bombers. And it's going to be the people of London and the people of France.
Yes.
You can't have any of those people in the show if you started this show in the early end of pilot training.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. Hey, we're going to drop them right before they ship out to England, because once they get to England, suddenly all the people that stick around for more than 10 minutes of showtime can be brought in.
Yeah. I don't know if you brought up the party scene. Of course, the one person was questioning if they should be celebrating that one crew made it to 25. Yeah. Is that really something to celebrate? I thought it was really interesting. I think it was, I forget who said it, but that you just got to make it to 11. He's like, why 11? He's like, well, then you've beat the odds, but I also liked how in this episode, you never did go in the skies. You're not with the bomber crews at all. And so now you're feeling the exact feelings that everybody on the ground is, which is wondering what's going on, who's going to come back, why didn't they come back? It creates the same suspense that they felt. And I thought that was a nice change from, I don't know if nice is the right word, but a good change. Nice. A good change from the previous episodes where we've been up in the sky with them. So not only to not have that constantly be what we're dealing with is watching them fall out, but just the wonderment. Yeah. And we're all left kind of wondering what happened to Buck. And of course, he's a hero of the show, and we read the book, so we're hopeful that we're going to see him again.
But my roommate and I, watching and discussing, and I told them prior to this, but literally our reaction was we looked at each other at the end of the episode and went, he didn't die on screen.
Yeah.
This show has not shied away from showing people dying on screen.
Yes.
He ain't dead.
I was going to ask you, okay, when I watched the series, and maybe I just kind of overread this in the book and didn't pay too much attention, when they said Captain Dye was the first one to get to 25 mission. Well, I grew up kind of thinking about Memphis Belle being the first to hit 25. So I Googled and I'm like, what's going on here and stuff? Because he wasn't part of Memphis Belle. And he wasn't even part, and there's actually some conflict a little bit on historians about who was the first one to reach 25. Now, in the book, they talk about Memphis Belle was promoted by the military being the first one, but there probably literally was the third crew to hit 25. But the military wanted to promote Memphis Belle because they were the first crew to hit 25 that hadn't lost a crew member, who hadn't had somebody die. And they wanted this happy fairy tale story of how the entire crew made it through 25. So I think it was the first crew was Hell's Angels, but they had lost. Yeah, they were number one. Yes, and they had, but they had lost several crew members. So, and then there was some politics behind line. And in the book, we even talk about how Clark Gable was brought over to the 8th Air Force, and he flew 4 combat missions, part of this documentary that the military was doing and the 8th Air Force was doing. So if you get a chance, read the book, because there's a lot of that's not in the miniseries. It's kind of fascinating on the PR side of this war and the 8th Air Force and how they were trying to, project it back home to the American folks. And
I would say that it does not shock me at all. I personally haven't. That was one bit of fun fact information I hadn't dived into, was who was the first bomber crew.
Yes. He was the first man, but not the first crew. Yeah.
But it does not at all surprise me that the military during World War II fudges the numbers a little on what was considered the first, so that they could then run a ad campaign for war bonds and all that, and getting people to enlist back in the States.
Yeah.
That is one thing for all the silly goofiness of the Captain America movies. That's one thing that I kind of enjoyed, and I think the nail on the head was just how ridiculous the U.S. got with their war bond campaigns and their enlistment campaigns, and how ridiculous the whole world got. I mean, everyone was playing the propaganda war was as big as the actual war.
Yeah.
And so to hear some of the cynicalness of it, but also some of the people excited on they want me to go back and talk about how it's possible. And they're like, I'm sure they don't want me to mention how unlikely it is. They want me to talk about how possible it is.
And then they went and raised it from 25 missions, 11. If you got to 11, you were doing good. They raised it from 25 to 30, that was the ceiling that your grandfather had to hit, right, John?
Yeah, well, I entered this comment online. We had some comments on some of our social media posts and stuff, and my granddad talked about when Brigadier General Doolittle came in, he raised the missions from 25 to 30 because they were starting to rotate and lose a lot of their experienced airmen and stuff. My granddad was at 20 when he raised it to 30. So my granddad did not think a lot of good things about Doolittle and about the brass because, here we signed up, we agreed to risk our lives and on 25 missions, and then during the ball game they changed the rules and they went from 25 to 30, and then they eventually went to 35, but that wasn't quite as a big issue because the war was tailing off. The dangers were tailing off. It wasn't
as dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it's still dangerous just going up, but it was definitely nothing like 43 and 44. And when they did that, that was 45, if I'm not mistaken. We'll let some of the viewers, I hope they chime in if we're wrong and stuff. So.
And that's something you wrote about in your book, A Boy from Cracker's Neck, which is about your grandfather. And that book is over my shoulder, behind your shoulder too. That the veterans from that era, as the new guys were coming in, they didn't have the same, how did you put it? There was
the boys from 45.
Yeah, the boys from 45, they were just kind of like the second string, sort of just didn't have the same.
The ball game was already won by that time.
Yeah, exactly.
And, they were playing mop up.
To take away from their heroism and their willingness, but the ones that were there before that, what they had to go through was just.
And Daniel, I'll share this story. We were talking about, this episode showing the civilian population and stuff. I wrote in my book, and my granddad told me this story that, he was in an English pub and he had just gotten his Red Cross package, and it had an orange in it. And that was a prized possession and stuff. And he had it in his flight jacket, and he was at this pub, and this lady and very thin looking young boy that was probably 6-7 years old was there. And my granddad came up to him and gave him that orange, and that boy didn't know what it was. And my granddad was at first he said, well, I was kind of taken aback. Why don't he know what an orange is? And then he realized that this was 44 when this particular story happened, that this little child for over half his life had been wartime.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't know what orange was because he'd been on ration food for practically half his life,
if not more.
Yes,
since
39, they were fighting this battle. We get over in 42, so these people, the Brits had already been fighting for 3 years.
And so if this kid is only 4 or 5 years old,
yes,
that's his entire life right there. Boom, war. That's it.
He'd known nothing but war and scarcity. I mean, and hunger.
Yeah.
And so, like I say, I really like where this miniseries is going because it's showing different aspects of the war. And like that narrator said, courage can take a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
I thought that was poetic. Yeah.
And with your commentary on courage, all I can think about now is the scenes with I'm not going to remember their names, but the crew that lets us see the resistance, and their discussion of well, I would have done the same thing when he finally came clean about I had to leave Babyface. I couldn't get him out.
Mm.
Yeah,
That,
that's such a heartbreaking thing.
Yeah.
And and the plane blew up as soon as he bailed out. I mean,
Yeah.
it would have been took both of them. I mean, but still.
And you could tell from the way that his crew member reacted that he understood what had happened and was like, I would have done the same thing. And I think that it was cool to not see it because we had talked in our last live stream, and we had talked on the last episode about how important going up for your friends was on this, and how much the camaraderie of each crew and of each wing was why these guys went up. How that even then they all understood what it was and what they were doing, and that connection of slowing down for one plane or whatever it may be still had its limits. There's still, at the end of the day, like, look, we get, like, hey, you gave it what you couldn't get him out.
Well, you're talking about the comrades, you see at the very end of this episode, Bucky's hurrying back to join the fight.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
Yeah.
And
I liked the whole game metaphor.
I want to pitch. Yeah. I loved the baseball
in the book, they talk about how they talk in code, and I think people could pick that up, that because of all the German spies, they kind of talked in code, and they talked a lot about baseball, if you notice.
Yeah,
because
how was his
game then, and that's one thing probably the Germans didn't know was baseball terminology and lingo. I mean, but they're
who did the most famous baseball player at the time play for?
Okay,
he never played for the Dodgers.
I know we're running out of time, but did y'all catch how they caught the German spy?
No. What was his
how he wrote? Did you see how he wrote the date?
Yes.
Okay, Europe. Okay, you know how when we write a date, we put the month, day, and year.
They flip the day and the month.
They flip the day and the month. So they'll do the day first
where it was.
And the month. and when I first saw it, I didn't really catch it. And then when I rewatched the episode early this morning, I caught that the German spy that the resistance killed wrote the date backwards like a European.
Yeah.
So, here was a very trained German spy who knew, the national anthem, knew a lot about baseball and stuff, but he messed up on the date. And I was wondering why the resistance people were making them write it down. I just thought, well, why would you write anything down?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Like, why, isn't that sort of putting out their secret information that could put them at risk? But
and I'll recall, one of your favorite movies, Inglourious Bastards. How did they know he was an American or a British guy? Was how he held up, what was the number 3 or something? They do it different. They do it like this, and we do it like this. And so the writing of the date was the way they would screen whether or not you were American or a German spy. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because honestly, I was shocked when they shot him. We all were, I think, but that's a little detail that was built in that you had to look for. I'm really glad you brought that up.
And it's impressive that they knew to do that, considering that one of the bomber pilots even was like, I talked to him for an hour.
Yeah,
he was American. Yeah. It's like you talked to him for an hour. They found out in 2 minutes he wasn't American.
Yeah. That was
and what was it? Stupid is dead. I thought that was
oh yes.
Yeah.
And I loved the you do that again and I'll deck you.
Oh, I know.
Those are some brave young women, weren't they?
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that it would be just some innocent looking young women with some handsome boys would be the escorts. That would definitely not catch as much attention. And that was an interesting, I'm sure this is all very accurate to how it was actually conducted.
Yes, the attention to details in this miniseries is very good. I know some of the critics have criticized the CGI and some nitpick, but there's actually some great attention to detail in this miniseries that I think history is going to be very kind to this miniseries. Looking back, very, very kind.
Yeah, I mean, granted, the CGI that I remember on planes is the early era of dogfights when it looks like a PlayStation 2 video game. So that's more my baseline for what good airplane CGI comes to. But the fact that you can see so many different things going on, and like it's sure, they might not get every little minute detail, and it might not actually be a plane flying in every moment, but overall, every scene with the planes is very well done. There's almost nowhere on the screen you can look that doesn't have the detail you need.
Yeah, I think you really do. It's easy to watch that. And of course, this is a reenactment, so we all know that. But to be able to watch it and say, this is what they went through, and this is what they would have seen, we have to recreate it. But I do think it accomplishes the purpose of helping us appreciate just what they experienced, even if it has to, be done.
I'm sad that we don't have that. This wasn't made like Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers with more of those that served still alive to see it, because I would love to see more of that. In the same way that so many men said that opening scene in Saving Private Ryan, you could not have changed a detail to make it any different from what they experienced. Yeah. I wish we could hear and learn more of hey, no, that's how it was up in the air. I wish we could get more of that, but time always
actually moves. That's a great opportunity I'm going to take to present the fact that actually out there on the internet there are some interviews of veterans from the bomber crews that have watched Masters of the Air and have reacted. I found a few, so I'll find some of those clips and bring them in. And we can, in the future, we can build some shows around them or bring them in here and watch them and just kind of see some of the things that we can. There is a little bit of reaction. There's not many of them left, but yeah.
I mean, it's definitely not. They can do the same quality of reaction like they did with Band of Brothers, where we had the majority of Easy Company interviews at the end of an episode.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that, we're going to wrap this live show up. We look forward to next week's. I don't know if Danny will be joining us, but we are looking for people who'd love to come on and share what they feel about the show. And so if you're interested in becoming a part of this, be sure to visit our website, mastersoftheairtalks.com. And you can send us a message through our contact form and let us know if you'd like to come and join us here. And otherwise, we will meet up here same time next Saturday after episode 5.
Thank you much.
See ya.